Hi everyone, welcome to the Mojo Nation Play Creators Conference Game On session. I'm Richard, we've got Hazel from Gamely Games, we've got Tanya from Hasbro, and we've got Deirdre from Funko. Hi everyone. So we've got some interesting questions to ask you. The one thing I've learned over lockdown is to print it off, because you never know when the thing you had on screen just kind of disappears under a window and you kind of lost it, or you press it or you delete it. So yeah, I've been printing a lot of stuff off. Yeah, so we've got about an hour or so, we'll see how that goes. So yeah, I think maybe to start, I think everybody who's watching this has probably got a pretty good idea of who you guys are, but obviously things are always changing, trends are changing, business is changing. So I think it might be nice if we could just go down and introduce the kind of who you are and your company and the kind of games that you're into selling and maybe you're looking at, because obviously, we know Gamely and we know Funko, we know Hasbro, but things evolve, and as I've been seeing all the games you've been launching recently. So yeah, if we could maybe, Hazel, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, sure. I'm Hazel, and I am the founder of Gamely Games. We've only been around 5 years, so we're definitely like the babies in the games, one of the babies in the games market. The kind of games we make are family-friendly party games, card games. We've put 5 out so far, and what ties them together is they're all kind of hilarious, super family friendly, really inclusive, really simple to learn. And also they're all pocket size. So they come in a box the size of a double deck of cards. So good for the environment, but also people put them in their pocket and take them everywhere and play them everywhere, or that's what they tell us. And yeah, in terms of future games, we've got a few different things we're looking at, but that's kind of the heart of our business so far, is family friendly.
I love a good card game. Tanya?
Yes, hi, I'm Tanya Thompson. I work for Hasbro, and I'm the one Inventor Relations and Global Product Acquisition for Hasbro Gaming. Hasbro has an incredible portfolio of legacy products or games that you hopefully know, like Monopoly and Scrabble and Taboo and many others, Pie Face, more recently Don't Step in It. So we are looking for games in mass market. So, in the big box stores, and we're a global company, so we're definitely looking for ideas that translate across many countries. We in mass market are looking for big wows and magical moments. So in gaming, and especially these days, 2020 has taught us how games are extremely important to families. And our main goal is to bring families together in a fun play experience. Around a table, around a backyard, wherever it may be, and have this amazing time together with lots of fun and laughter.
Cool. Thanks, Tanya. Deirdre, over to you.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Cross. I'm from Funko Games. And we, the question, like, what type of game do we make? That's a difficult question, because we make so many different types of games, but I think what we're best known for is creating products that are intersectional between hobby and mass, right? Like, we exist in this place here in the middle that is bringing hobby consumers, giving them something that's interesting and that they love to play, but also realizing that mass consumers also are interested in this rich gameplay thing, and they're shopping in the same mass market stores as everyone else. It's those people are every person. It's not a one isolated group, and so thinking more holistically about the folks who are shopping in mass, and also that there's a lot of people in mass that just happen by the game aisle, and maybe 50% of people buying games in the mass aisle don't go to the store to buy a game, and it sort of accidentally ends up in their cart. So creating things that are accessible for people who are maybe surprised that they even brought home a game. Like, oh, this is going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
Let's check it out. So we're trying to create things that are accessible and bring new people into gaming.
That's great. That's great. Actually, it's a nice sort of kind of segue to another question I wanted to ask, is that obviously, you know, the very fact we're doing this remotely, you know, we all know it's kind of been a bit of a bonkers period, and a lot of people have, you know, unfortunately suffered very badly. But the games, you know, people have been buying games, you know, and they've been enjoying games, and they've perhaps been getting games out of their cupboard they haven't played for years, probably a lot of those Hasbro games. And they've been trying new games, you know, like Funko Games and Gamely Games. And, you know, I think I saw some stats in the UK, like 240% up. And I think that's kind of replicated in all the major markets, different amounts. Okay, we know it's not going to stay at that kind of amount, but I'm kind of interested from your perceptions, really, kind of the short term, because this isn't going to go away, and obviously people's habits have changed, you know, the sort of short term and even sort of medium to long term effects you think this might have had. Deirdre, if you want to kind of continue that, maybe.
Oh, yeah, sure. I think what we're seeing right now with gaming, and a lot of people coming to it during this time of COVID, you know, that everyone, and just like us, we are at our screen all the time, right? Like, we are here, and we're here. We're not going to conventions and playing in person. We're not, you know, we're not working together in person. And so people are, I think, desperate to get away from the screen and to connect with each other. You know, there's no sports or this or that. And so, you know, as people who create games, we've got this beautiful entertainment experience you can put on the table and that we can have together that really connects us personally. We look each other in the eyes. We're going to laugh together. We're going to work together in a way that's really meaningful. And because games have been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? That everybody knows that this is a safe and warm place to be, is sitting at the game table together. I think as game makers, we're really lucky that is our chosen field, is this thing that brings people and connects families. So I think that's what we're seeing, is people really coming home to gaming as an experience that brings their families together.
Yes, good. That's pretty good. Some really great points. I was thinking, Tanya, like, you know, I was saying a lot of these games that people have been dragging out of their wardrobe have probably been, you know, Hasbro games. And I'm just wondering, do you think that's going to have any effect on those brands? You know, maybe some old brands coming back that you might not have considered, or just your take on this?
Yeah, there's a huge lift, as you identified, in games. A company the size of Hasbro, where we have a lot of different brands, including toy brands. We've been extremely lucky to be kind of a leader, because, like you say, in these times, people are drawn towards things they know and some comfort, and that is often the game they played a long time ago. Maybe it's been collecting dust and they've brought it out, and really this environment has forced families to be together, because there's no childcare, kids aren't going to school. So now how are families going to kind of occupy their time? And it's wonderful, because games has, across the board, not just mass, but across the board, not just Hasbro, people have been seeing this lift, and which is wonderful. We think that I guess another kind of crisis situation we've lived through is when 9/11 happened, which was more kind of US centric, but there was a lift then as well. Yeah. And it was kind of like, is this going to be, back then it was looked at, and I've talked about this with other industry experts, but there was a lift when that happened in games as well. And it was kind of like, oh, is this just going to be a lift and we won't see what we typically see at Christmas because it's happened early in the year? Is it going to can carry forward? And what happened then is it did carry forward. I wasn't in the industry at that point, but I'm told it did carry forward. So we're hoping that it isn't just a blip, but it's like, as Deirdre said, it's like this amazing, you know, people are reminded of these incredible experiences. Yeah. They're being right now forced to kind of fill time with activities, And so we've seen a lift in puzzles is the same, craft, activities, same thing, like all of these things have happened. But what we're expecting is people then are now reminded about like, oh my gosh, this is actually, I forgot how good games can be, or how nice. I've raised 3 children who are now young adults, and gaming has saved our family kind of togetherness on so many occasions, because we regularly play games together, and no matter if people come angry to the table because they're getting reprimanded for not doing chores or homework or whatever it is, you get to that table and it just kind of all goes away, and suddenly you're connecting again face to face, like Deirdre said, and it's like this amazing experience. So so we are who knows, but we're hoping and expecting that what we're seeing now is going to just increase awareness for people now, that will carry forward, because it is such a great activity. It is obviously some sort of a lift, but we don't expect to go back to where it was, or that's what we're hoping.
It's great, and you and Deirdre said some great points. It's nice to obviously work in an industry where actually the products we produce actually do have genuine benefits. They're not just landfill, they're chucked. A lot of products these days you sort of feel fit into that, and games are treasured. The fact that we've got these sort of games on these shelves, and it brings me on to kind of Hazel, because I think probably a lot of people have, yes, there's people, we've seen a lift over the recent years, the past 20, 30 years, really. The tabletop business has been kind of slowly growing and then bumps at certain times. But there's always new people coming in. I'm sure over this period, there were a lot of people who thought, they haven't bought a game even for a number of years. And they've sort of, maybe jumped on Amazon or something and just kind of gone, oh, there's some games, and realised, wow, there's a lot of new games out there, And Hazel, I'm just wondering, have you seen that? Is that going to affect your business a little bit? Because obviously you've got relatively new brands, they're very sort of contemporary, and so interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've 100% benefited. Sometimes I feel quite guilty to being one of the only businesses that is doing well during the pandemic, but it's like you say, it's bringing value to people's lives, and even the stories that we're hearing, how the games are bringing people together, helping them connect, exactly what you were talking about, Tanya. It feels like a really nice space to be in, and yeah, so we've seen I think throughout lockdown on Amazon our sales were up 400%, so it insane for us. We're just kind of been so pleased with it, but also people really are turning to games, trying to get those warm family experiences. And I think, like you say, our games, they do very well on Amazon. They're kind of gateway games as well. Like people think, I'll give this a go, I'll give it a try and see what happens. And from what we've been hearing from people, it's really been helping them connect. I'd say one thing that the pandemic has made us look at our games in a new light has been Zoom, and people starting to play games across Zoom and kind of remotely with people who are far away. We've been talking to people who we normally see once or twice a year, and have ended up having these weekly Zoom sessions, which has been wonderful. But we kind of looked at our 5 games again, going, so this one works on Zoom, and this one doesn't work well so well on Zoom, and like applying that lens is definitely something we'll be doing going forwards. Not that you can ever replace kind of face to face, that's always going to be the best, but a couple of our games, like Soundiculous, people discovered you could play that just as well on Zoom, and that's been fantastic to hear about people enjoying that with people all over the world.
No, that's great. In fact, I've done a couple of clients I work for. We've sort of turned their games into kind of Zoom-friendly games, and it's not something you'd sort of think about doing. And it's kind of interesting to do that. And also, my son, we've been playing some games sort of face to face, but also remote. He's just finished uni, so all his friends are sort of all over the country. And they've been playing games kind of, on Tabletopia and platforms like that. So I think it's interesting. I think there'll be a sort of research, a growth in that area for sure. Because, it's a lot of time you just can't find people to play games with, they're not around. And obviously it's hard at the moment. And I'm interested, obviously, when we get back to normal, are the games cafes, and whether they're going to see a kind of lift, as people kind of have been playing. And they just kind of, because they say it takes 3 months to change a habit. Well, there's a lot of habits been changed in the last 3 months, and so that'd be interesting. So some great answers, guys. Really, really interesting. So I'm going to flip it around a little bit. I want to talk about something that comes up a lot, and particularly obviously with companies like Hasbro and sort of Mattel and Spin Master, the bigger companies, where they're looking for sort of like a winning moment. And I sort of hear that a lot, you know, obviously as Inventor, you hear that sort of feedback a lot. And I suppose, I don't know, I get the feeling that's kind of been emphasized a bit from kind of games like Pie Face, which are obviously massively successful, you know, really, really successful. And I'm just interested to kind of how you tackle that kind of winning moment in your games, and whether you think focusing on it maybe too much is detrimental. I don't know. So maybe Tanya, I'll go straight to you for this one.
Yeah, so when Pie Face launched in 2015, it changed the face of everything. From on so many angles, and it really did come from that organic viral video between the grandfather and the grandson, and just kind of created this awareness around people that don't necessarily play games, that they were interested in looking for that game. And we were lucky enough to be the company that could deliver on that, you know, so on a global level. So we are in mass market still very much focused on what you say is the winning moment. Used to be described as the TV moment, but
Yeah.
now TV has changed so much that we know what that means. But it is very much that magical moment that we are still looking for. I think it's evolved since Pie Face. So I think we've all learned that you can't create a viral moment. It's not just a formula one can, you know, follow and then create themselves. So but still that because we put a lot of money into marketing and things like that, we need something to market around. So usually it is a moment in a game, whether it's a mechanism that is doing something really funny like Pie Face did with the whipped cream, or whether it's something else. We've now evolved that, because it's not so much that, you know, that funny moment that can be captured. It could be something, you know, that the game is creating. There's a new game mechanic, or that's very interesting. I would say Codenames, for instance, was very different than any of the games previous to that. I mean, we could find examples, but it really hit at a high level, and had people playing different ways. Same as cooperative games did in that space. There's a lot of gamers now that like that type of game, versus cooperative was really only known for like preschool games up to that point. So there's always these new kind of these new moments that we're looking for that can be from a mechanism, and it can be drawn from the game mechanics itself. But for us at mass market, I love Hazel and I have like met on occasions before, and I love the games that she does. For a company the size of Hasbro, to do like more of an indie style card game is just more difficult than us doing something that is what the markets are used to from us, which are this mechanism game.
Yeah.
But we are very much looking at games, just good games again, like our legacy portfolio. So there's no kind of big explosion moment in Taboo or categories, but they're just really great to play around the table. So that would be the focus there. So that it is evolving though from 2015.
Yeah, sure. Deirdre, I'm just thinking, because obviously you said, you know, your Funko is more kind of this sort of middle gateway. It's kind of mass to kind of gateway games. And I, you know, personally, I feel sometimes the winning moment is used to kind of help sell in the game to buyers, because it's very often rarely you actually play a game with a buyer. You know, it's like, so I'm wondering how you tackle that. You know, kind of what are your winning moments in kind of Funko games? How you kind of define them?
Yeah, I think you're right on, Richard, about that, like that sort of buyer moment, and that, you know, you want to talk about how to win the game, but that people aren't as focused on that, like that big sort of crazy crescendo right now as they were maybe, you know, in 16, following the massive success of Pie Face, everything was that sort of like the crazy gross out splat sort of moment. And that we, you know, rode that wave for quite a while. That was a lot of fun, and those games are fun. Definitely they have a place. But now, I mean, I think as we're developing games, we also, sorry, there's an airplane going over me. I'm near enough to there's a lake where some float planes land, and so they're loud.
That's cool. So that's a picture there. That's some sort of local airport.
Is that a Seattle picture or what? Cool. There's like a float plane flying too low over my house.
That's good.
So this is working from home, folks. So anyway, we think about that sort of as we're developing something, the feeling and the sound of, you know, like, how does the game build over time? You know, almost in our studio, a lot of people on our team have a film background, and so we come to it from that sort of storytelling perspective. So what's the arc of this, and like where does all the tension build up to, and what's that moment? You know, if you're running from dinosaurs, or you're running from sharks, or you're working together to travel back in time, like where are you? Where does that nexus exist? Yeah. And then, you know, and what happens when you get there? Is that quiet? Are we all like quietly trying to get there and outperform each other? Or are we standing up and screaming at the dice? Like, these are two different moments, and they have a very different feeling and a different place in people's lives. But we think about that as we're starting to develop this, and then as we're sharing it out in the world, then we can try to, you know, sort of condense that down to this is the moment, and this is how you feel in it.
No, it's interesting. You mentioned about the film side. I didn't even know that, actually. I know some people do kind of migrate because, you know, we're in the insane business, so there's a lot of kind of migration. But yeah, I think kind of that kind of emotional roller coaster you get through a game, you know, and trying to identify where those kind of moments are and kind of amplify those. And you're right, Tanya, you know, they were in the old games as well. They were always there. Perhaps they weren't focused on in the same way, perhaps they weren't. I remember when I started, they weren't really talked about in the same way. So yeah, and Hazel, obviously, as Tanya said, you know, your games are not, you know, different. You're focusing on the slightly different things, but this kind of, how do you sort of approach that? Because, you know, we all have to sell our games to buyers. So how do you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, so I'd say absolutely. The kind of big payoff moment is not something we focused on with our 5 games. I think we kind of came into games design quite naively and sort of thought, oh, what did we enjoy growing up, and how can we make something that will be fun? Yeah, like categories and taboo, I definitely think our games kind of fit into that continuous enjoyment, continuous laughter. We're super interested in people laughing and having, you know, laugh out loud moments, but it's kind of spread throughout the game rather than one big payoff. And yeah, although, yeah, like you say, selling the games is a different matter. So when we have fun with our games, the simpler we can sum it up, the better. Whether it's a buyer at John Lewis or whether it's your consumer on Amazon, the simpler you can sum it up. If it's got that twist or that kind of that super simple thing that captures people's imagination, then it's gonna fly. So we don't focus on the kind of payoff moments. Although that's not to say we won't one day invent a good payoff game for you, Tanya. We'll work on it. But no, so far our games, yeah, we've not focused on the kind of.
Okay, no, that's good. And I think, you know, coming back to the kind of, you know, Deirdre, the sort of the movie moment, you know, that kind of the elevator pitch, you know, as we all kind of know it, is, you know. And I think that's definitely become kind of even more important. Can you kind of, I quite like it on whether you game the game, actually, because they kind of summarize, you know, even kind of fairly complex games kind of in a kind of like, you know, just in a sentence. It's probably something they've kind of crafted, maybe with a company. But I think maybe to inventors, obviously there's a lot of potential inventors looking at this, that, you know, it's an art to do that. It took me, you know, I still kind of try to practice it. And it is hard, you know, to try and distill that down into, you know, just a sentence, just a kind of strapline, really. This is what the game's about, because I think people kind of forget that, you know, ultimately these games have to be sold. And although you can do a nice 10, 15-minute presentation, you've got like 5 seconds on a shelf, or, you know, 10 seconds with a buyer before they're looking over something else, or you've kind of lost it. So I think if you can get that kind of as early on in the process, obviously that kind of can hold itself through the whole game. If you can get it right at the start, there's nothing worse than trying to distill it right at the end. I think we've all been there. We've got a great game. It's like, well, I can describe it in a paragraph. Can't quite describe it in a sentence. Cool. Okay, so I've got some individual questions for you, but feel free to, if you want to sort of jump in after, if you've got some comments. So this one's Tanya. So again, talking about the inventors. So I know, Tanya, that you are pitched thousands of ideas every year. And although that's it sounds great, I know that it's a hard slog when you've got to be, it's very nice. But I'm just thinking to kind of make your life easier, maybe, and give inventors the best chance. Could you kind of give them any tips? I know you've probably said this before, but I think it's always good, things they should avoid, or just kind of best practice for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not a slog. I love it. You can see in my own home environment, I love games. So it's my dream job. So I feel like when inventors pitch me ideas, I'm like, ooh, this is amazing that I get to do this day in, day out. So yeah, there's definitely things that inventors can do. First of all, know who you're pitching to. I would say first and foremost, like, do some research on what company. You've got 3 different companies here on the panel today. So if you were pitching to the 3 of us, it would be, we appreciate when people know the company is that they're pitching to. So knowing more kind of what Hasbro currently has on the shelf is important, and the kinds of things that you might see as an overarching, characteristic of our games, and then knowing kind of, knowing the company that you're pitching to is really important. You doing a sizzle video on the pitch is really helpful. I can't think of too many pitches that I see where the inventor hasn't prepared a sizzle video, anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, that just highlights the best parts of your game. And it doesn't have to be professional. It can be shot using an iPhone. So what it needs to convey is energy, enthusiasm, passion, and most importantly, what your game is. So, and the best parts of it. So I would say that is really important, is doing some homework before your pitch to know exactly who you are pitching to and what it is that they're looking for. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm not looking for necessarily another categories, although we're always looking at extending our brands. It doesn't have to be an exact match. Or if it's like I feel like, they love mechanisms. Well, this is a mechanism that is in a different category. Still show it, because we may look at it for a category we already do, or we may be working on something that we haven't launched yet either, because anybody that knows or has worked with Hasbro and other big companies, things are always changing. So, never just count it out, kind of thing. I would say that having a sizzle video and knowing who you are pitching to is extremely important and always helpful for us.
No, that's great. I always say it's a bit like kind of going for a job interview, really, that if you just applied the same CV and letter to everybody, it don't stand a very good chance. You might be lucky, but I think kind of that tuning it for sure. So I'm doing the basic homework. Yeah. Deirdre, Hazel, I don't know if you guys have got anything to add to that.
No, before we were Funko, our team, we were independent inventors, and so I used to pitch Tanya a lot, and schlepping big cases, say 50 games to Toy Fair, maybe we'll place one, it's and especially if you're pitching non-licensed work, you've got to have, it's got a very clear story and this, it should be, 30 seconds. I mean, especially if you're pitching in the room, like kind of come out with a million different prototypes. And it is a job interview. Your livelihood is the placing of the product. And so, like you said, approaching it like that, you put your best foot forward, you practice your pitch, you practice, you spend the money on the prototype, and you want to make it get the best possible outcome. So
I'm thinking, how did you kind of start? Do you see inventors as anybody? I guess you do.
No, so I was going to say I'm definitely more likely to be in the inventor seat than the person being pitched to. We're idea heavy and resource short in our company. We've got hundreds of ideas that we're, little nuggets that we're like play testing, and some will work up into some stuff. We can't put out as many games as we can think of. So no, I'm definitely more likely to be in the inventor seat pitching to other people than, but I also don't have a lot of experience with that. So no, I've got nothing. Sorry.
That's good. Everyone's on a different path. Deirdre, I'd like to talk about licensed games, because, as you say, I know, obviously when it was Prospero Hall and, Forest Pruzan and now Funko, I've sort of known you guys for many years, and you've done some fantastic games. And you've obviously launched some recent games, obviously Godzilla and Pan Am, and really kind of interesting, not obvious licenses. But, obviously when you've got a licensed game, it's kind of obviously getting in the door a little bit. But I'm interested to kind of what you think, the process of translating a brand into a really good game, and kind of the key points you look at when you do that.
Yeah, well, our team as Prospero Hall, as you mentioned, we have been, inventing games as a group and developing them for a lot of years. And we do kind of have a process for that, especially when we're approaching a licensed opportunity. And I think maybe that for our Prospero Hall team, that's really what we're known for, is taking IP and creating an actual like legit meaningful game experience that really feels like you're inside of the property. And so to do that, we have a pretty big team, but we first approach, we approach, hey guys, like we're gonna make a game for Godzilla. Who has a game, who has a, and then everybody starts pitching ideas and stuff like that. And it pretty much very, very quickly comes up, who's the biggest fan of the IP? And I know on the Funko side, this happens with the pop figures and things like that too. We're looking at this and we're like, who's the biggest fan of this property? Okay, you're already a mega fan. You already know how people feel about it, and then the team gathers around them and starts diving into the property. So for something like Pan Am, that might mean where it's not there's not a bunch of film or TV to watch. It's about reading historical information, right? Like poring over big books and stuff and learning about like the history of this airline that isn't, they're not flying anymore. So what's that all about, and how does that all work? Or Godzilla, going back and looking at all the Godzilla, all the series. So we're really about foundational research. And then we start, talking to people about how does it make them feel? What's the most important thing about this? With Godzilla, like crushing up the buildings and just like causing chaos, like, do you want to play as Godzilla, or do you want to play as the humans trying to get rid of Godzilla? Do you want, like that kind of tension, figuring out where's the joy and where do people want to exist inside of this thing? For something like you see, I think I've got Jaws on the shelf behind me. For something like that, we think about like, do you also want the opportunity to play as the shark or the humans?
Yes.
Right? And maybe it's an asynchronous game. Maybe that's how you want to play it, because, I kind of want to be the shark. Like that sounds like a lot of fun. And, but or maybe I can outsmart the shark, but you need it to be very smart, right? You need a human there running it, not necessarily just the AI of the game. So we really try to, I think that's really what we're fans. And we think about what celebrates the brand and where do you want to exist inside of it. Yeah.
I love the idea of kind of that kind of internal pitching, just rather than sort of, well, you're designing the game. Oh, okay. Just give
that's a huge part of it, because it may be like, we may have dozens of games presented from our team. And then, and then we're, and our team is even they're pitching to us, like, here's our game, here's our game. Then we're going to build a bunch of stuff. We're going to play a bunch of stuff. And it might end up that it's this amalgamation of a couple of things that really makes it sing. Or, one vision from the start may go all the way through, but it's more often this big team effort, which is what makes this Prospero Hall sort of special, sauce, I guess, that holds it together.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Hazel, because you haven't, obviously, correct me, I don't think you've done any licensed games so far, but is there something you've ever thought about doing, or anything that's sort of been ticking in the back of your mind? Or
so I love that idea of, the things that we're mega fans for, making a game for it. That's a great place to start from, right? If you're a fan. So I was thinking now when you were saying that, what am I a mega fan of? What would I, so the brain's whirring. But it's not something, because we're such a small company, I think probably, I don't know. I don't know if it's something we'd take on ourselves. I think we'd probably try and pitch it to someone else and let them deal with the big licensing contracts. We like an easy life, but definitely in terms of coming up with fun new stuff about the worlds you love. That's very important.
Yeah. And Tanya, obviously, I'm just thinking that obviously you get a lot of licenses coming to Hasbro to kind of, would you, it's kind of reversal, I guess. I'm just thinking, I don't know how you kind of whittle that down, in terms of what you're interested in.
Yeah, we have a licensing team that is going to all the licensing shows, looking for opportunities, like when we did Stranger Things and things like that. And then the question is it a new creation? Like, I would say what Prospero Hall has done amazingly well, or is it taking a brand that people know and putting it on one of our brands? So like Monopoly Gamer, where you're not just, because there's so many different monopolies out there where it's just like a horse monopoly kind of thing. But Monopoly Gamer, first time Monopoly I think ever resonated amongst gamers, which is good. But actually was, the thing about it is it wasn't just like Monopoly with different graphics, but it was actually leveling up and things like that people are used to in the video game space. So we definitely kind of look at things across the board. We're usually looking either with big partners or ones that are coming up as promising, like when Stranger Things hit. And now, of course, that E1 is part of our family. It's opening that up even more.
No, that's cool. I think, I think just one point maybe to add to all that is that with licensing is that, make sure, and to go back to your point, Tanya, do your research, make sure if you're going to show a company an idea, they've kind of got the rights to it, or the rights aren't with someone else. Obviously, rights can be obtained sometimes if they're not given out, but it's the worst thing when you get shown like Harry Potter, and he's like, well, I don't have Harry Potter, that's my competition. So it's like never a good start. Hazel, I was going to talk to you about, obviously you're an indie game company, you say you've been around 5 years, and I know from personal experience, I think there's like at least 3,500, probably more than that, new games launched every year, and across the whole spectrum. And you tell a lot of people this, they kind of, what? It's like, how can that be? But, there are. So I'm just thinking, as an indie games company, how do you, and you've done really well, but how do you stand out against all of this other stuff?
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge. We were one of those, our first game was one of those 3,500 games that came out in 2015. And so we started on Kickstarter, and I think Kickstarter is an amazing platform just for increasing, the diversity of stuff that's coming out, and it gives people an opportunity, a new kind of route into getting your game out there. So we've definitely benefited from that. In terms of making our games stand out, so I think some of the things we think about are the visuals. So although our main focus is on making the really, the great game inside, we're also quite conscious of how it looks on the shelf, making it eye-catching. I think we've got in a nice space where our games are quite giftable. So because they're so mainstream and kind of has like the mass appeal where you could give it to anyone, it's really easy to learn. They're like almost guaranteed laughter. No one's going to get it and go, oh, this is not my kind of thing. Even, serious gamers, it's kind of that kind of light thing that might play in between bigger strategy gamers, right through to someone who's never played a game before since they were a kid, and you know, they can pick it up so fast. And then, so I think, to be honest, I was thinking about this before the call about marketing, and you know, we're a really small team. There's 4 of us. We all have very young children, and we work 2 or 3 days a week. So we've not got manpower. We've not got big budgets. All we've got is the strength of our ideas. So we definitely make space for ideas. So we try and follow lines of curiosity. So if we're, you know, put lots of interesting stuff in our brains and then get out and about, you know, in nature to try and let all that stew around, and hopefully good stuff comes out. We're lucky because we just.
So will you say, do you know, community, I guess, is important in terms of people reviewing, and that, especially on this, and so do you kind of actively work with them or try to kind of feed back to community, or, you know, from your marketing point of view?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing, we've been like the vast majority, I would say, of our sales have come from word of mouth.
Yeah.
So either whether it's people recommending, you know, you've got to play each game with 3 other people, so you're sort of doing our marketing for us, just
Sure.
by spreading, by playing the game.
Yeah.
And Amazon reviews as well have been hugely, you know, hugely beneficial to us. And it's hard. How do you get a good review? The main thing I think we consciously do is play testing. So we rigorously play test our games. We've got a really good, a lovely community who are happy to help us, which is amazing. And yeah, and we ask people for negative reviews on the playtest form. You know, I think it was an idea from Billy and Deirdre at Mojo.
The 1-star review.
The 1-star review.
One-star review.
Genius. We get people to write 1-star reviews.
Oh, absolutely.
Reluctantly, no one wants to give you a 1-star review, but it forces them to pull out those little kind of niggles, those little bits that they think. And yeah, we fix them all before we put them out. So not to say we don't make mistakes and we don't get things wrong, and you know, the rules, you know, there's always tiny things that you probably tweak in the second version, but playtesting for us, you know, has I think helped us get the reviews, which help us.
That's so good. And that's, you know, I think that's the one thing, because when a lot of people, you know, I speak to a lot of inventors, and they kind of show you the game, you know, and then you sort of like give them a bit of critique, and you can just say, well, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear the good stuff. It's a brilliant game. It's the best game I've ever played. But it's like, you know, you've got to be open to kind of really ripping your own idea apart, you know, and finding those things that need improving, you know, because it's very easy just to sit there. Oh, I played it with my family and they all loved it. Well, what do you think? You know, it's like, you know, so yeah, that would be it's a great bit of advice, and I'd definitely amplify that. Guys, anything to add to that, Deirdre, Tanya?
Yeah, I think you know, we have a big playtesting facility here at our office in Seattle. Of course, it's closed right now, and so we're sending games home with people, and they're playing on Zoom, and we're observing.
Right.
But I think, you know, that point of Hazel is really well taken. When you want people to find problems, right? You want to uncover as many issues as you can while you're in development, while you can fix them. And we kind of joke about that. We should put it up on the wall in our observation room, like, break it here, break your game here, so that it doesn't break out there. I don't want it to break once Amazon ships it to someone, you know, break the, you know, in a game sense or physical. But this is where we find the problems. We're not, you know, we don't think poorly of the game designer or the producer of the project when their game is full of problems. These are opportunities for us to make the game better, and we believe them when somebody something's not working cognitively or physically about the product. That is gonna, you know, you multiply that times 100,000 units, 100,000 homes. That problem's gonna come out somewhere else. You can't really discount it and say, well, that's just this family. Right? Like if they're finding something, it's real. So you want to fix it. I think playtesting is a terrific tool and a very important opportunity for all of us as creators.
Yeah, definitely. Which has been tricky, definitely, in this pandemic, because all of our labs, we have a fun lab as well that is closed, and we've figured out how to do it because it's not going away. We're not all gathering anytime soon. Certainly in the US where our headquarters is, so we've had to come up with other strategies in order to get the same results. And I also love, so I discovered one of Hazel's games the first time sound ridiculous. When I was in Scotland at the Fringe Festival with a bunch of other gaming friends from from one of Chloe Stoiber's sons and like other just good friends that we gather every year around the world and play. But we happened to be at Fringe, so I found out about Hazel's company through that show, which was amazing. So it's like when you're a small indie with not a company without a big budget, your games just have to be really good such that people want to play it and they pick it up and they use it in their shows and things like that. I've worked for smaller companies who have zero budget for marketing and like successful companies selling it into 60 countries with not a lot of marketing budget. And it's because they have a loyal fan base and they've got an amazing brand that their fans love. So when they publish a game, then people check it out kind of thing. And with Kickstarter, absolutely. I use Kickstarter when I'm always trolling Kickstarter for me to see if there's something there for Hasbro. And I've heard from people who have very successful Kickstarter campaigns, like some of the best, and their friends, and they're like, it used to be like, here's a chance to see if it's viable. Now it's a marketing tool. And that's why you see not only, 5 years ago, the small independents there, you're seeing big companies launching stuff there as well, because it's just another vehicle to get the word out there. Amongst 3,000 new games launched every year, it's just another way to do that.
Yeah, I suppose it's a double-edged sword. The fact that it is so much easier now. You don't have to rely on it ending up on a shelf somewhere. There's the only way you're going to get it into consumers' hands. That there's all these other vehicles. By the very nature of that, of course, there's a lot more games. Yep. So, Tanya, I just wanted, you sort of talked about something. I think it might be interesting to sort of talk about essentially around lockdown and the changes that we've had to make in the games business. Obviously, everybody in all different businesses has to make their own kind of changes, but do you think there's any changes that you've made or kind of Hasbro's made that will stick, kind of long term, that you've thought actually this works pretty well?
Do you mean from the published side of things or from the inventor relations side of things?
Maybe from both. Or anything that you sort of think's relevant, you personally think, actually, I'm going to change this going forward, or maybe, obviously if there's confidential stuff, I understand, but if there's anything you could share would be kind of interesting.
Well, so from an inventor relations standpoint, thankfully, because our inventor community comes from every corner of the world, we're used to, I'm the sole person out there looking for games for Hasbro, and I can't be everywhere at once. So, and I can't attend every con, every event. I wish I could, because I love to travel. But especially now, obviously, nothing's happening. So we're doing a lot of Zooms, but we always have. So it's not it hasn't been a barrier for intake. If anything, I think it's a barrier for people that suddenly have kids at home, and so their invention creation time is not as much as it used to be. So there's some variance that way. But from a publisher's standpoint, I think it's just what every publisher is always doing, which is, you've got your own strategies and your own, missions to what you're publishing around, but also you should be super aware as to what is trending and what's happening out in the world. So right now, there's just there's an increased desire for bringing families together. So games fits that mold very well. But then also there's this trend of there's so much, which is why I think partially why Pie Face was so successful, is because it was at a time where things were very serious. And so it's like, I'm not looking to get together and come down more. I'm looking together and just be lighthearted for a moment. Yeah. And some people would have scoffed at Pie Face as a game, but it clearly, because of the numbers, resonated with the masses. So I think in times like this, where there's so much uncertainty, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of already heaviness politically and in so many regards, it's like even there's certain games that have changed, and they're getting some flack right now because of what's going on in just like Black Lives Matters and in that whole racial tension in Hasbro. very it's very important to us that we're extremely inclusive. We are for families and children, regardless of who they are, where they come from. And so I think there's a heightened awareness around that as well. So it's like knowing what the trends are and knowing kind of what people have an appetite for and are interested in. There's been such a huge surge around these adult games that have been happening. It'll be interesting to see exactly where that heads, if they can be as vulgar and as, like, we all, you know, they've been super popular and it's been definitely based around humor, but where's the line? And I think there's a new line being drawn at the moment.
Really, it's a really good point. Yeah, that sort of, you know, sometimes you just need a bit of frivolous in your life, you know, when everything's going on. Deirdre, you mentioned, I think, is it 18 weeks? You said you've been working at home?
Yeah, we've been at home for 18
So
weeks.
I'm just thinking you know.
Who's counting?
Yeah, counting, yeah. So is there anything for you that you think you've seen or you're going to adapt or, you know, it's worked well, or just interested?
Yeah, I think our team took to it very, very quickly and easily. We already had a lot of really great collaborative tools that we used, and we just, you know, sort of leaned into those very heavily. As far as, you know, reviewing things and stuff, it takes a little longer to ferry all the samples or proofs around to the different people around town. A lot of shipping and stuff like that.
Oh, you're right. So you're literally sending proofs around for checking.
On some things, yeah, we're sending proofs. You know, they're joking like, maybe we should just put that large format printer at your house. Like, it's like, all right, fine. But you know, like, that's an adaptation. Like, how do we keep those kind of things? Because we make physical things, you have to physically manifest them. So, you know, making sure everybody has the tools at their homes that they need to be able to make prototypes, to, you know, if they need printers, like you're saying, Richard, you're printing things out more frequently. You know, do people need printers? Do they need cutting mats? Do they, you know?
Yeah, there's some basic stuff. Yeah, sometimes if you haven't got that,
Yeah, exactly. And so, and also people are stopping by the office and raiding the workshop for parts and stuff that they can take home. But so it's just trying to find that new way of working to create a new process for how to prototype and keep your prototype updated through the various iterations and cycles that we do has been, that was like our first big challenge. But also we have adapted to things like using Tabletop Simulator for designing games. So that, you know, people can be building, and either the graphic designer, he's, you know, on the other side of town, he's re-uploading all of the parts, you know, and here comes the new game board with the new fixes, and then, you know, and people are dialing in to play. So there's some really great things about it that can help us be more efficient in our prototyping too.
No, that's great. No, for me as well, because obviously playtesting is a bit of an issue. You know, you just can't. People I know would playtest, or they can't. So we've been doing sort of Tabletop. I've been using Tabletop a lot because it's just kind of simpler. It's not like an AI, but you can just kind of dump stuff in. And it's actually been really good, you know. So I definitely think that's something, you know, I'll continue with. And I think that kind of virtual testing. I guess, Hazel, it's not such an issue for you because it sounds like you're kind of really flexible anyway. So you've just kind of probably gone along with this and just gone, well, what's the problem?
I mean, we did buy a printer, so that was. We now have a printer. So we're all super flexible because we're only working a few days. We did have a co-working space, so we used to work in a kind of office space with other people. Obviously that switched to working from home, but it's made us get out and about as well. You know, as soon as we're allowed to go for those walks with one of the people, we're having all our meetings outside, you know, one-to-ones, getting out into the South Downs. I definitely kind of feel that thing Tanya was saying about the headspace. So yeah, between the four of us, we've got 6 children, 5 and under, and no nursery or school for 3 months. Definitely impacted on, you know, that kind of free headspace for coming up with new games. But it also had loads of advantages. So the two that kind of stand out for me, 2 of the games that we've been working on this year One of them is sort of a game that's not a game, all about conversation and connecting with people and having those interesting conversations. So the fact that we're having Zooms, you know, every night with our friends far apart, and even trying to reconnect, you know, as a couple, you know, spending all that time together, but is it quality time? So, you know, testing out all our questions for that, that's been kind of, it's given us the perfect excuse to do that. And spending time with our kids. So they've proved to be brilliant play testers. We're bringing out a kids version of Soundiculous for this Christmas. So actually having our kids around and everyone else having their kids around has proved brilliant for that. So there's definitely been some silver linings for us. And going forwards, I think we will. I don't think we'll go back to our office space. I think we'll keep trying to meet in new places, you know, whether it's cafes or museums, or because we've got the flexibility, we want to make the most of it and keep our brains, you know, different space, different ideas. So yeah, pros and cons, but
that's great. No, that's really good. So I'm just looking at time. We've got, I think I have time for a couple of questions I think I can squeeze in. So I was interested, obviously a lot of new designers, we were talking, you know, all these new games coming out, a lot of new designers entered the market in the last 5 years, Hazel, you're being one. But I'm just wondering, but obviously there's a lot of other people kind of, you know, leaving the business, and, you know, so I'm just wondering where your feeling is, you know, is the business in a good place creatively, the games business? Hazel, maybe you want to...
Yeah, I mean, I've only been in it 5 years and I'm overwhelmed by the creativity. You know, every time you think, I guess it's like music albums, every time you think all the good music's been made, you think, oh, all the games must have been made by now. Someone brings out something that's game changing and you're just like, oh yeah, that's genius. So yeah, I think there's huge creativity in games making. I think there is a lack of diversity, and, you know, I think that is a problem. And if there was more diversity in kind of the games industry, that would lead to even more creativity, you know, different minds, different backgrounds coming into it. I think it will only improve as the games industry works.
Yeah, I agree. Deirdre, you're obviously building off what you said earlier about the, you know, your film contingent, which was kind of interesting. So do you see the kind of bringing people in from kind of outside, different kind of creative skill sets?
I mean, we talk about this all the time. It is astounding how much creativity there is in the game space, and how every season, every year, it's like the bar is raised, right? Like, wow, things that folks are doing now would not have been possible 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I've been in the business 13 years. There's, you know, it's like it's amazing how fast this has evolved, and how it's just remarkable. And our team, we design games for preschool, for 3-year-olds, a nursery, all the way through to, you know, to adults, and deep strategy sort of stuff. And it's just on both ends of it, how much more creativity there is, and how it's so inspiring. It's incredibly inspiring to pick up new games and to meet new up and coming game makers, and all these new companies coming all the time with all of their fresh ideas. It's really, it's a renaissance. I think every 15 years or so there's a big one in gaming. Maybe the last big renaissance was Catan era. It feels like we're in another one right now. It's really special.
Yeah. Tanya, do you think, are you seeing kind of a lot more diversity with the people showing you games? Do you know, obviously Hasbro's very open to kind of seeing, you know, new inventors pretty much for a big games company. So
yeah, we see new inventors either at events like Chi-Tag or Mojo Nation or Toy Fair. We also have a portal online called spark.hasbro.com where people can submit. So there absolutely is this growth and this renaissance, I would agree, in terms of gaming. And I think I remember when like whether it was video games or then suddenly apps on phones, and people are like, oh, board games are going to disappear. And in actual fact, where we're at right now is they're more important than ever. I think a lot of people recognize the fact that people are looking for face-to-face activities that get them, and in particular for your family, your kids, off screens. Like, it's amazing how people can all be sitting in the same room and be totally involved in their own world through their devices. and as concerned parents or just as people, like, you crave it. And I think now more than ever, because of the pandemic, we really have been removed socially and in person, face to face. And I know that, you know, most people really, really miss that. And I feel like when we figure this COVID, you know, situation out, there will, I don't know, there will be a new normal. I don't think it will be the old normal. There will be a new normal, but it's becoming super apparent to people what's really important to them when suddenly everything's being removed in what your normal is. And that what's important is kind of that there's nothing that can replace that, either that human touch or that face-to-face connection. And games just do that. Luckily, we can do it around Zoom, but I think also people, or Zoom or whatever platform you use, but I think people are also like super tired of virtual connection, right? Like, we've been doing it for months and months, and there's just nothing like being able to sit across from the table and have those kinds of connections. So I think out of this, that will, you know, will happen. And this whole idea of games being will continue to grow and survive board games, because that's the type of interaction it actually provides.
It's cool.
So,
Just kind of building off that, just for our kind of final question, and just kind of looking to the future, really, because obviously there's the blurring of the lines between all forms of entertainment. You know, actors who are Hollywood would never go into TV, all over TV, and then people, you know, then they're starring in video games, and it's all kind of a mashup. So I'm just thinking where board games fit into that, the tabletop games fit into that, and kind of like if we were to sort of scope out, like, I don't know, like 5 to even 10 years. You know, you've got kind of mixed reality coming in. Has that got a place? I don't know. I'm just interested to kind of get a kind of perspective on where you think it could head, if you've got your crystal ball out.
I think, if I can, I guess I'll go first. Like, I think certainly with Hasbro now joining with Entertainment One, we've always recently considered ourselves Hasbro an entertainment company that is looking to connect and make the lives better for kids and families. So this whole, like, kind of I think it's all about connecting with a brand. Consumers want to connect with a brand. They don't want to connect. It's not about corporations, and I believe in this. It's more about, like, how do I connect with you as a brand? And so we've all become storytellers, because telling our story and being able to connect more authentically with our consumer has become so important. Because back in the day, there wasn't many ways that you could connect, whether it was through a TV commercial or whatnot. Now, there's so many different channels, which has allowed for this amazing growth on the indie side, as well as, you know, corporations having to come up to speed to, like, how do we connect with our consumer? What do they care about, and how can we deliver that? And so being storytellers, suddenly entertainment, and there's different ways to provide that entertainment. Richard, you mentioned, you know, whether it's AR, MR, VR, whatever it is, there's always different technologies that allow us to connect more authentically or differently or more magically with our final consumer, which is what we're all trying to do.
Yeah, authenticity, I think, is the key. You know, rather than trying to sort of ram a technology at a problem, it's like, you know, is it authentic? I mean, Deirdre, I don't know. You know, I can't think of any technology that you've used in your games over the past. I'm not sure, but would that be something? Is that something you're looking at? You know, obviously, technology is a very, you know, it's a very broad spectrum. Is that something you would consider or look at, or?
Oh yeah, we have done games in the past that we would call sort of app enabled, right? Like there's some sort of feature, and actually we have one launching this summer called The Last Defense, which is a game that comes with an app, and it is designed, it plays in 20 minutes or less every time you play it. Okay. Because it has this app and it has this driving force. Now, when we're designing that app, because what we love about gaming and what we think families love about gaming is that it takes them away from the screen. We're very careful to design that app that you don't need to look at it, basically. Yeah. It gets going, and then off we go, and it's gonna give us a soundtrack and a driving force in the product, but it's not the focus. because I also have children. I have 2 sons, and if that device is out, they're in it, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, you don't want that, and you don't want that energy going away from your game space. And so when we're developing something that has some sort of integrated technology, that's really important. Where is the focus of all of our energy, and keep it on the table? So, we're looking at that, but then, bigger picture, to where do we think things are going in 5 years? Funko as a company, it's all about fans, right? Funko makes so many things that they'll do like these deep fandoms, and that's where we really connect our games division. Like, that's our driving mission too, is connecting with fans. And if that's fans of our Prospero Hall games, or just gaming in general, or a very specific license, like making things that deeply resonate with people and connect with them in deep in their heart, and things that they love, is really important to us. So I think that's that continues to be a driving force. And then as we look at what's happening, online and in forums and things like that, Board Game Geek, like, people are, having big conversations with things, and as they become a fan of something, maybe something any of us make, they start talking about where they want to see it go. Yeah. And I think that opportunity for expanding on brands and the consumers themselves being a more active and engaged part of that is going to continue to build. It starts on some place like Kickstarter, that kind of conversation, but the way that it can continue now is so robust, so much more robust than it used to be. And yes, we're really excited about that kind of engagement.
Yeah, I love the idea of, it's also dangerous to open it up to the fans, kind of, because everyone's never going to be in agreement. But you're right, to kind of finding a way to go and get that. And you're right, that happens like on Kickstarter. There's a very kind of meaningful dialogue as things are in development. I've even seen Kickstarter projects kind of evolve, like, that some of the goals change based on what people ask. And I think that's really cool. Hazel, have you got, if you could paint your sort of ideal kind of, if I could do this, if technology would allow, is there anything that?
So we're at the moment we're definitely in that space of helping you escape your technology, and I think that's a really healthy thing. But speaking as a consumer, there's plenty of games I enjoy that incorporate technology. Like, one of my favorite games, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, like, you need the app, and that's what creates the atmosphere and the mechanics of the game, and that, that brings people together and tears people apart. But it's a fantastic game for all being around a table together. Like, that is a game that brings people together, and even it's got technology, but it's enhancing it. So I definitely think technology can enhance board games and card games. And I feel like I'm not a particularly technical person, but I feel like excited to see where it goes. And we're not working on anything technical at all, but but cool. I'm excited as a consumer to see what comes out.
I think the authenticity, I think, is obviously really, really important, kind of using technology in a meaningful way that you kind of don't even think about it as a piece of technology. It's just part of the game, just happens to do something. I think they're the kind of magical parts. I remember looking at an old Milton Bradley catalogue where it goes years back, and they had an 8-track in there. So I think before the sound chips, it was like, what? This is crazy. So, there's always been kind of technology leaps and kind of ways of using technology in sort of smart ways. I suppose it becomes invisible, but I think the community side as well, and that's a really interesting way, rather than kind of designing and get these games, which used to be sort of in a complete vacuum, really. When I started, it was, the first consumer spoke, you didn't even speak to a consumer really, and then to do some testing. But now, of course, there's, as the products evolve, you can see them sort of having feedback and evolving, obviously, and 3D printing and all that kind of stuff. Who knows? Well, look, guys, I think we've basically reached our time limit, but it's been fascinating to talk to you all. Thanks very much for your contributions. I think for your Inventor, there's definitely stuff to take away from that. I hope everyone made some notes. Tanya, you're probably getting a load more Inventors kind of contacting you.
Bring it on.
But good luck, and with all your new games for 2021 and obviously 2022 we're going to be looking at soon. So thanks very much. It's been great talking to you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.